If I just look beyond Bitcoin, I think there's an opportunity here for Ethereum to really shine, and I think Solana as well, because Bitcoin market dominance at 55%, it's not as interesting to me. It's not to say that I'm bearish by any means. You could see Bitcoin go up to, pick your arbitrary price, $100,000. But in that environment, what does Ethereum do? What does Solana and others do?
For more on the market's action, let's bring in head of Tasty Crypto, Ryan Grace. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Jen, how are you?
I am just doing fantastic, and it looks like the markets are doing a lot better than me. On this Monday morning, talk to me about what's standing out to you. Bitcoin seems like it's very close to hitting all-time highs.
Yes, wake up this morning, check the markets right away, and we're inching closer and closer to those all-time highs, which I think we're going to hit. And ultimately, I think we're going to reach new all-time highs. Might not be right away, but when I look around, really having a hard time finding anything to be bearish about. And maybe that in itself should be concerning, but it is very bullish out there at the moment. And I think you also see that in traditional asset classes as well. As you had just mentioned, the NASDAQ is near at an all-time high. So I think it's kind of all the same trade, but it's got us feeling good in a sense.
When do you think we'll hit those all-time highs?
I think it's going to be soon. When I look at some of the indicators that I follow, whether it's just moving averages and some of the divergences there, you're a little bit extended. RSI is certainly elevated. It's in territory that quite often you'd consider oversold, north of 80 when I look at both Bitcoin and Ethereum. So I would expect a little bit of chop, a little bit of a pullback, but it seems like we're going to hit them sooner than later. Frankly, I'm a bit surprised at just the speed, maybe the magnitude of this move. Very bullish post ETF announcement. Didn't think that we would be here this quickly, though, in just a month and a half or so since those announcements.
You mentioned the overbought conditions. RSI is over 80. Usually we see a pullback after this, but we could stay in overbought conditions for quite a while. How long do you think that we could stay in these conditions? And I guess more specifically, when do you think we'll see a pullback?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that you could stay here for a couple of weeks, a month. I really have no idea how long we can be in that territory, right? As you mentioned, we can certainly stay there for a bit. I don't know when we'll see that pullback. And could that pullback be from 70 to 65 or from higher levels to kind of those higher lows? It's quite possible. I think what you want to look for, though, are opportunities in those pullbacks. I don't think, there's anything structurally bearish at all here. So this is an environment where I'd want to buy those dips. And maybe that pullback is just a small correction. I'm not looking for something where, all of a sudden after this move, we see a 20% drawdown or anything like that. Certainly, we know that these assets can be very, very volatile. When I look at the implied volatility of Bitcoin, it's near the yearly highs. It's closer to 80%. What does that really mean? That means that on a weekly basis at these prices, you can expect a move, and it could be to the upside as well, but you're expecting a range of about $7,000. So if we were to get that anytime soon, if you were to start to see that that volatility materialize to the downside, I'd be looking to take advantage of those price moves. But when that happens, who knows? I mean, right now it seems very, very bullish, and it's more likely that we continue to move higher and can stay in that overbought territory for some time.
We're talking about Bitcoin now, but meme coins are seeing their day in the sun. I mentioned a few in our intro there that are really rallying. Many of them are over 100%. Are there any coins outside of Bitcoin that you're watching right now?
Yeah, I'm not looking at meme coins specifically. I think what we're seeing in terms of the price action there is representative of the bull market. I wouldn't say that we're late stage by any means. And why I say that is because when you look at Bitcoin market dominance, it's at 54, 55%. I think this still indicates that, a large amount of the move has been realized in Bitcoin. Up until recently, it's outperformed just about everything. And so looking beyond Bitcoin, what I'm interested in is trying to trade what I think is kind of the next stage of this bull market. And that's a rotation into not necessarily meme coins or much smaller cap tokens, but I think you're going to see Ethereum start to perform. I think you're going to see Solana and some of the larger, whether it's Ethereum, kind of L1 competitors, some of the monolithic chains that are out there. I think there's some interesting things that are happening in kind of the Cosmos space. But if I just look beyond Bitcoin, I think there's an opportunity here for Ethereum to really shine, and I think Solana as well, because Bitcoin market dominance at 55%, it's not as interesting to me. It's not to say that I'm bearish by any means. You could see Bitcoin go up to, pick your arbitrary price, $100,000. But in that environment, what does Ethereum do? What does Solana and others do? And one of the things that I'm focused on is that ratio where you price Ethereum in Bitcoin. So ETH to BTC, it's near the lows. I think it's about 500ths, right around there. Could it get to, in terms of the price of Ethereum, 1/10 of Bitcoin? Then you can start to come up with your implied Ethereum price. And I certainly think it's going to be a lot higher from here if we do see this move continue in Bitcoin. So to summarize all that, I'm focused on ETH. I think one way that you can play that in terms of maybe higher beta exposures or a little bit more volatility, a little bit more, not so much leverage, but how do you really take advantage of that? I think it's L2s. I think that's going to be a theme of this cycle. So that's optimism, it's Polygon, it's Arbitrum. You've seen Polygon outperform here recently. Optimism's done well. Arbitrum has slipped. You have to certainly be aware of some of the supply dynamics and the token unlocks that are coming. But I think when you work through that on a kind of intermediate time horizon, those are the things that I'm interested in. Sure, Solana has had a heck of a move since November, but I think at 130, that's still very interesting to me. Again, in an environment where we expect prices broadly to continue to move higher, those are some of the areas that I would focus on.
Anything in particular that you're watching for in the Solana ecosystem?
I'm just looking for probably more of those outsized moves in Solana specific tokens. So, we've seen some decent performance in things like Pith. We have the Jupiter airdrop. And so you're seeing some outperformance, or I shouldn't say outperformance, excuse me, but you're starting to see a little bit of positive performance there following some initial selling pressure. So those are some areas that I'm looking at. And yeah, I think just trying to keep my eyes open to what pops next on Solana, I think might be kind of a fun short-term trade. But generally speaking, I think Solana is where I want to be. If I could only pick a few tokens here, I want to have some exposure to Bitcoin. I want to have that ETH exposure. I'd look for ETH to outperform. I might trade that spread where whether you do that through derivatives or how you put that on, you're long ETH and you're short Bitcoin against it. And then I'm just looking to be long some Solana if that's kind of how I, pick my portfolio makeup.
All right, and before we wrap up here, I want to broaden it out and just talk macro for a few seconds. Unlikely we're going to see rate cuts anytime soon. What are you watching from a macro perspective?
Yeah, I mean, that's really kind of what I'm focused on. I think the market has been focused on for some time and has maybe pulled a little bit of this forward, though the economy doesn't seem to be deteriorating at the rate that, the market was initially expecting in terms of some of the interest rate cuts that we were pricing in. I believe that we were starting to price in cuts somewhere around June. So whether or not that happens, yet to be seen, but that's what I would focus on. So focusing on what the probabilities of a Fed funds cut through those Fed fund futures are, and just seeing kind of how that changes as the data comes out. When I look at the macro picture, yes, inflation has come down substantially, but we are starting to see signs that it hasn't completely gone away. And so there's always the possibility that the Fed has to stay here for a bit longer than what the market expects. And I don't think that that's necessarily bullish. On the margin, I think what really drives all of this, and you're seeing it reflected in the NASDAQ as well, is liquidity. We've seen global liquidity come back off of those lows in 23. So the conditions are improving. I think what concerns me, though, is for this to really take off. What benefits that asset price inflation, the rate cuts, and ultimately the quote unquote money printing? I think bad things have to happen. And I don't think that crypto is immune to kind of some of that short-term volatility that you might see in the event that there's selling pressure related to kind of structural issues in the economy. That could be that the banking crisis, regional banks from a year ago, rears its head again, hasn't completely gone away. It could be geopolitical risk that seems to continuously pick up on a week-to-week basis. Commercial real estate. Who knows what it will be? I don't think that Bitcoin is necessarily immune from that. And I think that you would have to go through that period to get to a point where ultimately the Federal Reserve and other global central banks are, back at it and really stimulating to the extent that that would benefit Bitcoin. So that's kind of the one thing that I'm looking at that would concern me a little bit. But in terms of trying to figure out where do we go from here, I would just keep my eyes on Fed funds futures and what those derived probabilities are of rate cuts.
Ryan, we are going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining Markets Daily today.
Thanks for having me.
That was head of Tasty Crypto, Ryan Grace. That's it for today's show.